This country was founded on the early founding fathers' understanding that this was tyranny. So don't tell me that this country will not respect that if you have tyranny, that your spiritual tradition would lead you to stand up to it. And let's not make our faith so weak and PC that we can't say that. So I think courage is demanded at every level, and the biggest level is making a drastic lifestyle change. That's all. What do you think? No, because I know every time I say it's not going to be a diatribe, unfortunately I have a bad habit of doing that. But I am interested in, and you guys want to sit down? Oh, I can't tell, okay. I was like, man, like I could tell you were sitting, but I was like, I thought it looked like you were like really tall. Okay. Thoughts?
Thoughts, questions, reflections.
So I'm curious about, I heard you in there, you said something about like a budget and like we don't need too much money in materialism, which I do agree with. We don't need to be materialistic, but at the same time, shouldn't we be or aim to be at a position where we have money to give and to do good?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, my point wasn't that we don't need money.
Oh,
No. So there's two things. There's sayings of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Okay, so you know about the Protestant work ethic? Have you guys heard of these terms? Prosperity ministry, prosperity gospel? So it came out of the Protestant church, and I went to a Catholic school. I have a lot of respect for Christianity, but I have my differences with certain interpretations. In the Protestant church, stemming from Martin Luther, but once it was changed after the 1800s, there's this idea that wealth was a sign of God's pleasure. And I wrote that in my status, that we justified wealth with, Oh my gosh. Yeah, so it was called prosperity gospel. So Creflo Dollar can say, I need $50 million to buy me a private jet so I can spread the gospel of God. And ask each of his congregants to donate $200. Okay? And I actually respect him, but Reverend Run, he's from Run DMC, he joined a prosperity gospel thing in New York City, totally got deluded by this minister. He gave him he gave his minister a $350,000 car, Rolls Royce, as a thank you gift for saving him. And then they did a Rolls Royce marathon where all of them, it was prosperity gospel. The argument is that wealth is a sign that God is happy with you. And the problem is when you create an ideology like that, one, it makes you look down at poor people because it means God's unhappy with them. But two, it makes it very difficult for you to authentically critique Donald Trump. Right? So the point is that the Protestant Reformation, there's a lot of good that came from the Protestant Reformation, but one of the negatives was that a people that came from apostles and Jesus that were barefoot suddenly started believing that wealth was objectively a good thing, which is anti-Christian. In the Bible, it's anti-Christian. Okay? And these were supposedly the literalist Bible people. What happened was Muslims bought into that when they came to America. And it was actually, I think, a result of post-colonialism. But Muslims started seeing wealth as God's pleasure. I was meeting someone I love a lot. Me and this guy, Yahya Rhodes, Muslim scholar, we were meeting this guy in Michigan. And he says, yes, God has blessed us a lot. We have a very wealthy community. And I immediately said, that's Protestant work ethic. And this guy was like a major donor, so Yahya kind of looked at me. I was like, sorry, his parents. I said, you mean God has tested us a lot. We have a lot of money. But because you see, now people say, but isn't it a blessing? God is a test. No, it's a test. And it can be a blessing or a curse based on how you use it.
That's true.
But what I'm saying, the reason I'm mentioning that is that our problem isn't a lack of money. So I'm not going to speak about we need more money. We are now the second strongest minority population in America. And we are the most useless. Because we have money, we don't have power. And we don't know the difference. When I was living in D.C., you have people that make, until Clinton, the president of the United States only made $200K a year as a president. You have politicians, okay, low level, like staff members, who have more power than any of us will in our life, and they make $60,000 a year. They know the difference between money and power, right? We have no lack of money. Every time we have a dysfunctional school being built, we raise $1.5 million. Now, am I against Islamic schools? I taught at Islamic school. But we got to call it for what it is. Islamic school is 9 classes teaching weak secular sciences and usually one-dimensional class on Islamic studies. So we're paying $1.5 million for one class. Just do an after-school program. Right? So what I'm saying is there's no lack of money. But we don't have a lack of money. Right now, I can't find people to work with. And God is my witness. You know Chris Blauvelt, who started Launch Good?
Yeah.
So him and I were in Michigan. This guy offered us 500K randomly. We were talking about a boarding. It's actually his idea. I was helping him with a boarding school idea. And this guy came to us and said, I'll give you $500,000. We said no, because we cannot responsibly use that money. Because I cannot convince my friends to take a courageous life path. So the issue is not money, it's courage. No one is willing, because my dad is a millionaire. It's very difficult for me to make $30,000 a year. And I had to prove to myself I could. And it's not, and people said, I made so much money so I could afford you responsibilities to become what I am. No. I made so much money so I could afford you responsibilities to change the world. That's the paradigm shift. What, I gave you all these opportunities I didn't have and you're not going to become a doctor? It's like, what? And you claim the Prophet? Sorry, that's anti-faith. Because Ali radiallahu anhu, Ali, we all claim him, he wouldn't have been married if he lived in our society. He was poor his whole life. And the Prophet married him to Fatima, his daughter. So we're anti-spiritual. That argument of wealth is anti-spiritual. Now, the Prophet ﷺ said that a strong Muslim is better than a weak Muslim. Okay, so that's the saying. Because we believe in Protestant work ethic Islam, and we want to justify our lifestyles with faith, which is exactly what the prosperity gospel community did, we say that, one of the interpretations of strength is financially strong. That is actually true. It's not so when Trump and these guys are misinterpreting Islam, we spend the last 100 years misinterpreting Islam. So why are we talking about Fox News? How many Jummah khutbahs misquote the deen? All of them. I started giving Jummah khutbahs so I wouldn't have to listen to them. You understand what I'm saying? So they took that one part of financial strength and they said a financially strong Muslim is better than a financially weak Muslim. They argued that. That was an argument. So according to that, a rich doctor is better than the Prophet. Like, what kind of stupid logic is that? But the reality of that is, if you were to be someone who was rich and pious and did not live the lifestyle of a rich person, and you were Abdurrahman ibn Auf and just gave everything away, then you would be better than someone that didn't have that opportunity because you were tested with more and you did it. It doesn't mean that if you live in a castle, you make $200,000 a year and you symbolically give $5,000 a year to the mosque, you eat out, you do this, you go on random trips to Turkey I'm talking about, this is the lifestyle I grew up in. And then you say that a financially strong Muslim is better than a weak, and then we have a rally for Syria, but we don't give a large percentage of our money away. Mark Zuckerberg gives 99% of his money to charity. Warren Buffett does. Bill Gates does. Tell me the last doctor that lived off 50,000. It doesn't happen. I'm sorry, it doesn't happen. You go to our fundraisers, you go to our activist meetings, and there's 9 BMWs outside, and we are the people who are being oppressed. It's disingenuous. And now, it doesn't mean we're all ready to make that challenge, but let's at least realize that we're being fake. And Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, the great companion, what did he do? He used to actually be a thief before he was a believer. He went through this complete, Musab ibn Umair, we could talk about what he gave away, but Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, when the Muslims conquered Persia, the Persian Empire, they brought back rice for the first time. And by the way, the companions never had refined bread their whole lives. They lived tough lives. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, never tasted refined bread. It's hard for us to understand the lives these people lived. Abu Dhar takes plain rice from the Persian Empire, and it has no salt, none of our, we made our whole life cooking. It's not in our faith. Oh no, but a woman should make her house warm for her husband. That doesn't mean you spend 40% of your life cooking elaborate dishes. That your dinner parties look like every night. Look like you break your fast with the feast. It's imbalance. Abu Dhar al-Ghifari takes some rice that he gets. He doesn't know what it is. He's never seen rice in his life. There's no salt, no seasoning, whatever. Plain rice. He puts it in his mouth, he spits it out. Like, we would spit it out because it's like, there's nothing on here. This is how there's so much tension in families. Right? You didn't salt the whatever we say. He spits it out, and they say, why'd you do that? He says, by God, this is so delicious. I feel like I'm being given a piece of paradise in this world. We hear that, and we say that in khutbahs, and we're not living a life at all like that. Peter Singer at Princeton, he actually did that. He lives on $50,000 a year, he makes $180,000. And he says that what we call charity is actually our moral imperative. And then at the end of his life, he was said by the Prophet ﷺ that he lived alone, he would die alone, he would be raised alone. He actually he was not able, he saw a shift in the community immediately after the Prophet. And this is like still the companions. He says, what has happened to us? This is like the companions' time. the best generation, right? Which is, I'm not saying quotes like they're not. They are the best generation. But he said in his time, he says, we're starting to depart. He used to go in the marketplace and say, don't you remember how things used to be? That's like 5 years earlier. And so the Khalifa had to finally tell him, Umar said, you have to go live by yourself. You can't. He was not able to adjust back to society. He went and lived by himself. At his death, the companions came to visit him on his deathbed, and they went into his room, and they saw him crying on his bed. And he said the same thing. He says, I've taken too much from this world. I've taken my allotment from the hereafter. And they looked around his room, and there was a straw bed, and there was a clay bucket, a vase, or whatever that he used to take water from, like a jug. That was how he used to wash himself and drink, and he had a straw bed he used to sleep on. And he used to say that I sleep on a straw bed because I saw the messenger of God sleeping on a straw bed, and that's why the Prophet used to actually have lines on his back from the bed he used to sleep on. I mean, you're talking about the Prophet coming out one day, the story of Abu Bakr and Umar are wandering. Like, when you're hungry in Ramadan, you start wandering, like you go to a grocery store and you start buying spinach and stuff because you're like starving, right? He saw Abu Bakr and Umar like in a delirious state, they were so hungry. And then he says to them, what's wrong? And they say that we're hungry. And he says, I suffer from the same affliction. And they lift up their shirt and they have the belt with the stone and they're trying to keep their hunger in. He lifts up his shirt and he has 2 belts. Now hold on a second. This man chose to be a slave when he could have been a king. And in Saudi, we have kings dressed like we have slaves dressed like kings. The Saudi royal family. But what I'm saying is that they were willing to make those sacrifices. When he was dying, he said, I've taken too much from this world. And they looked around, they saw nothing. So where is the spiritual perspective? So haven't we sold out to a lifestyle? Haven't we sold out to luxury? And I'm a victim of that. I'm trying in my own, and it's so hard to go the other way. People who don't quote scripture. You try to make a revolutionary change, they're suddenly like scholars of Islam. They're scholars of watered down, maintain your status quo, misquotes of the faith. So let's not criticize ISIS for doing what we have done, and we just think it's more benign. But taking a prophetic tradition and justifying wealth as a spiritual path is actually more dangerous than killing people. Because you can kill people, but this is killing the faith itself. So you can think you're pious and you're living in a castle while people in the inner city are starving, and you think you're a good Muslim. It's better to kill a person than to kill the spiritual path itself. And that's what we're guilty of.
The other question is, I know you said that we shouldn't feel, well, it's not we shouldn't, but you feel more, you don't feel the fear and stuff that we were talking about, I guess. But what I'm wondering, your opinion on it. Do you think it's, not that it's less faith, but for someone like me to kind of not want to hide it, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
With the whole, people saying we should put on hats and just
Yeah.
What's your idea on that?
Yeah, first of all, I wasn't responding to you when I said we shouldn't feel fear. And it's an individual's right to react for their children, and there's a legitimacy. Fear can heighten your senses. In general though, but fear can heighten your senses and make you wise, and there is benefits to fear, but it has to be contextualized, right? We can feel fear for others, but we don't fear for ourselves. That's one of the issues of contextualization. Do you understand? But it gets to a point where you don't feel any fear. But it's not a naive, not feeling fear where you do stupid things. You do not go to a gas station. I don't go to a gas station after midnight now, in the middle of nowhere. That's not being afraid. That's being wise, right? There's a difference between this naivete and fear. A lot of what happened during the good old years in the 90s where we were activists and passionate, we were saying stupid stuff back then. So it's not all good, and it's not like 9/11 and we became weak. We also became wiser, and that was a good thing. My favorite teachers, Imam Siraj and Sheikh Hamza, they said a lot of crazy things back then that were wrong about Jewish people and all types of stuff, right? That was wrong, and we can call it wrong. We don't have to sugarcoat it, right? Now, as far as the headscarf, it's not my place to talk about that. That's something for you to know. But theologically, we know that there are situations where you can, and this is a theological principle, and this is where knowing our deen helps. The idea is not to water down our deen. And even what you're saying about dawah, you're right, that there may be people who are closer to God than us that are not Muslim. On the other hand, there's a principle of wanting for others what we want for ourselves. And we believe that our spiritual religious path is truth, okay? And this is the balance. I do believe, I'm not a proselytizing person. I don't write music so people become Muslim. I don't even mention Islam in my music overtly. I do believe that my faith is true. I do want people, if they want to enjoy that, to enjoy that. I also believe that I wear Buddhist, and it makes me a hippie now, but I wear Buddhist prayer beads for a reason because I have found benefits in other faith. But overall, I have chosen Islam because I feel theologically is the most true, right? So there's a balance between watering down and saying like no, it's like every path to God is equal. We're not perennialists, and as much as I love Sayyid Hussein Nasser, there's a separation there, right? But what I'm saying is that without watering down your faith, we have to know our principles. So Ammar bin Yasser, who was a companion, right, radiallahu anhu, may God be pleased with him, he saw his parents being killed for their faith, and he renounced his faith in that moment because they said, "Say that you're not Muslim, or we'll kill him." And he said, "I'm not Muslim." And then the companions later, they were like, "What did you do?" And it was actually, even though other companions died and didn't renounce it, and that was seen as maybe a higher station, it was legitimate what he did. Now, in a point of danger, he actually renounced his faith. What about wearing a hat instead of a traditional headscarf? When the cloth is actually not the principle is modesty. And the cloth is no, I'm not saying hijab is the headscarf. See, the hijab is not headscarf. And I wrote that in my stats. Hijab is reduced to headscarf. Headscarf is the flag. It's not the ship itself. You can't define the ship by the flag only, right? Because then what's the hijab for men? And you can't buy hijab for $5. That's saying you're buying metaphysical modesty. And you can be more modest than someone that wears the headscarf if you don't wear the headscarf. So there's nuances, but it's still part of the faith. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. So now, if you are in a point of danger and you can renounce your faith, even as long as you don't do it in your heart, you can't change the style of a headscarf in points of danger. You can renounce your faith publicly without changing your heart, and you can't change the style. That's where legal theory is so important. And the reality is most of us are pretty illiterate about our faith. You can't go into a hospital, do emergency surgery because you watched a YouTube video, but you can give a speech and guide people if you've watched a YouTube video. So we just have to become literate, I think. You can do emergency surgeries to people's hearts after spending a summer in Saudi or Jordan or wherever, but no one would let you into the hospital doing that.
So I guess my question is, like, we talked about, there were like a lot of talking points that you mentioned, but it's like, what is like one actionable step if we are introspective that we can take with us?
Okay. I think that comes from you all. I'll tell you. I'll give you. That's not a cop out. I can give some practical things. But what I think is, because I was asked this by my students in Indiana yesterday. We're part of an organization where we do different things. And one of the things I told them at the end of that is that because it was a moment of introspection. I was like, we created this institution to be different, and then it became another educational theoretical institution, Mishkat, the organization I teach at. And I said that this has to become a movement, not just an educational thing. The talks have to, so for example, the paradigm has to shift completely. So I don't want us limited by saying one thing, but I'll give you a few examples. So for example, when we do something like this, the paradigm shifts. We tried this out when I was living in Toledo for a few months, where instead of, no, it was Indiana. Instead of just giving like 2-hour talks like we did today, the paradigm, this talk was to kill talks, not to continue talks. We reduced the amount of theoretical content and we increased the amount of practical action in our programming. So Medina Project, you do something at Habitat for Humanity, you have a 20-minute theoretical discussion, then you actually apply it. What we did when I was in Indiana is we went through Surah Rahman. Okay, so they asked me to say, give a talk on this, the 55th chapter, and the verse in that chapter is فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. That's repeated. Well, it's actually not repeated, but it seems like it's repeated. That's the whole other story. And it means, which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? So instead of giving a 2-hour lecture on the nature of gratefulness and memory connected to gratefulness, we actually talked about it for 15 minutes, and then we went to the Indiana Blind School. And we actually visited blind people, and we're trying to experientially live this theory. So 10 minutes of theory should lead to 10 hours of actionable work, both internally and externally. So that's where the shift happens. So movement-wise, what happens is we start asking ourselves. I was talking to kids in Indiana about this. One thing I tried to do was, I have some people who know me know this, like even my first album is named after the street I was born on, Gillingham Lane. I have a real attachment to my childhood home. And I have an attachment to my, okay, this is kind of hard to explain, but my childhood self I try to externalize him from who I am today. So what I do is, like, I look at my life timeline. This seems very abstract, but I do it very concretely. Like, I literally have 15 points in my life, ages that were like formative, or maybe 10 ages. So like when I was 7, is like I have a very strong memory of being a kid, thinking I was Robin Hood. I was in a treehouse. I told myself I was going to change the world. I was going to do this. Most of us see that as impractical. Now we enter the real world. I believe I left the real world in that moment. Right? If you've heard Miranda Lambert's song, The House That Built Me, check that out. And Age of Innocence by Don Henley from the Eagles. Listen to those two songs. That's what they're talking about, that we left home and we moved on and did the best I can. I got lost in this old world and forgot who I am. Right? That idea. So what I try to do is I take the 7-year-old Saad, right, that little kid, and I take the 12-year-old one and the 15. These and I think of them as different people. And I do this. I'm kind of weird, so I do this quite often. And I'll imagine that I'm in a room like this, except I'm with all my previous selves. Each of them had a different dream, and I have to answer to them. I swear. What, you do it?
No, my sister.
She does that? Okay. So it's probably some type of mental disorder we'll find out about later, but there's 2 of us in the world that have it. But literally, and this may sound strange, but it's actually been extremely, because it's so easy to sell out. And like once I became well known in the Muslim community, you start buying your own hype. Like right now, I think I'm a good speaker because you're listening to, like, there's so many nonsense things that can creep into your heart if you're not constantly reasserting who you were. That 7-year-old kid didn't care about money. The 7-year-old kid was not going to sell out to a corporation. Like I remember when I came out of college, I was offered this investment banking job, and I had to make a decision: $120,000 a year or $20,000 a year. Those moments, I don't make the right decision if I don't go back to that childhood self. Do you get what I'm saying? Especially when there was a girl whose father said we'll get married if I take the other choice, and I said goodbye to both of them, right? But you don't do that. No, but on a serious note, you don't do that if you don't go back to the earlier self. And so I take the 7-year-old, the 12-year-old, the 15-year-old, and I have to look at the 7-year-old kid who actually, according to Socrates, in the theory of recollection, everything we knew at birth. So the process of education is the process of remembering. So that kid actually knew more about the world than I do. So I look at him in the eyes and I say, I'm not going to let you down. Really. It may sound weird, but that is how I live. And so you go back to that childhood dream. Doesn't mean you have to become an astronaut, but it means that you still believe in possibilities. You believe that if you're not passionate about it, you don't have to be a CPA. Now, if you're passionate about it and you have a metaphysical understanding of balance and credits and debits, then do it. And now some people may have a financial situation where they don't have the luxury to make those choices, and they'll find their fulfillment in what they do. But if you have the luxury to make a choice, then it begins not by me telling you what you should do, but by you having an honest conversation with yourself. That what is it that you feel as passionate about as I feel about what I'm saying right now? Is there something in your heart? And if you haven't cultivated any real passion that's that strong, like something that God is my witness, that I don't fear death because I know I'm doing the work, that if I were to be killed right now, I would embrace that bullet. Like Cornel West said about Malcolm and Martin, I added the last part, but the first part he said that they died before they were killed. And so the part I added was the bullet was a mere formality. They already had lost themselves in their work. So the bullet didn't do anything. It just formally took them into the other world. And so if you find that thing that when you wake up in the middle of the night, you can't stop thinking about it, and then life becomes much more interesting. You don't feel like you're going to work. I haven't been to work in 10 years. Because if someone gave me $1 billion right now, they said, what would you do if you had $1 billion? I would be sitting right here. This is what I would do if I didn't have to make money. I moved to a basement so I don't have to make money. I am literally doing what I would do if someone gave me $1 billion. That's freedom. No one can take that away from you. And no day feels like you're going, like when I used to wake up at 8 a.m., go to high school, I don't feel like I want to get up. Someone says, oh, like, it's vacation. I don't have this is my vacation. My life is my break because I'm doing what I love. You find that, then what we have to do to give some level of concreteness is that we have to, if Islam is not a noun, and I would say all faith is actually a verb, not a noun, but grammatically Islam is a masdar, if'al, it's a if'al form, it's technically a verbal noun, then if Islam is a verb, doesn't it make sense that it implies movement? I mean literally, a movement. Nation of Islam, a movement, an actual social movement. Faith is not just a theological discussion. And one of the things that people don't realize about America, people don't pick their churches based on doctrine. Faith in America is extremely social and cultural. People pick their churches also based on who has the best Christmas party, where they feel welcome. The pastor, I feel a connection to them. I feel the love of Jesus in their voice, and those are beautiful things. We interact with people based on theology because that's the way we look at the world. We look at our religion as a list of do's and don'ts. We tell a Christian person in a gathering, oh, you guys believe in the Son of God. I have 10 arguments against that. They don't think about the Son of God in the way we do. They don't think of it as a doctrinal principle. They think of it as sacrifice. They think of it as a man who he loved me so much that it's not doctrinal, it's not aqidah. We speak in legal terms and theological terms because we've made our faith a book of legal terms. Now, if you were to speak to someone in an esoteric way, if on December 25th, if we had Jesus parties and we celebrated Jesus, and we said, because most of us are not in love with Jesus. It's stuff we say in interfaith. What's our connection to Prophet Saleh? Isn't he the one with the she-camel? What's our connection to Prophet Idris? Wasn't he the first one to ever write? That's not an emotional connection. That's Sunday school facts. When we don't have an emotional connection to things, we hide behind little Wikipedia insights. So if we're real with ourselves and if we become more in tune with ourselves, and if we stop selling out to external validation, and we have intrinsic standards of validity, because as soon as you're foreign, I talked about this last month, but when you get a check or you get an A, you start living for grades, and the brown community or Muslim community, whatever, is obsessed with being good at school, because it leads to good money later. You get over that, and I went to grad school, I played the whole game, but I'm saying you get over that and you realize that I'm not writing this paper because my teacher will be happy with me. I'm writing it because I'm passionate about what I'm writing. And I will not write this paper in a fake way. I'm not good, there's no research papers in America anymore until you're in PhD program. Even then, it's like you take a thesis you already know, you find 10 books that agree with you, you don't read the books, you take quotes out of them, you put them into a bibliography page using easybib.com, you write an argument based on a preconceived thesis. Yes or no? Don't you already know what you're going to write before you read the first book? So then how can you be mad at someone that says we're a terrorist and they go to Fox to find proof that we're a terrorist? We spent our whole academic career building preconceived theses, and now we're mad at other people because they have a preconceived notion. Our whole academic life has been fake. So we live authentic lives, and we find something, and then the part that's important is when you have a movement, you have one person who's writing a musical. Everyone validates that. People don't say, astaghfirullah, there's people dying in Syria and you're writing a musical. The metaphor of that is, if you find out there's 20 million people in Africa that have AIDS, one group of people will go and start giving them vaccines to slow down the effects or whatever. Another group of people cannot do that. Another group of people has to start working on the cure. Another group of people has to work on medical anthropology to teach people to have safe intimacy so they don't get AIDS. Another group of people has to work on economic development of the third world so they live in economic conditions where they're not led to a social circumstance where they'll live a lifestyle that will lead them to have AIDS. Another group, so now if all groups of people become first responders, 20 years from now we have only dealt with symptoms and not the root. Similarly, as a community, we need people to be writing musicals. We need people to be writing novels. We need people to be working in media. Everything is not first response. For every scholar, Muslim scholar, our scholars are also, and I study with scholars, I respect them, but many of them don't have holistic contextual knowledge. They only have theoretical book knowledge. So they have to be surrounded with people who understand context. So career diversity, you cannot have less career diversity in 2015 than the companions had in pre-modern Arabia. We have like 90 doctors and no farmers, and we wonder why we're starving, right? So when everyone finds their niche, they find the thing that makes them great. And there's something I did that may be helpful. I made 3 circles. It's like a Venn diagram. And in one circle, I listed things that I was good at. In the other circle, I listed things that were beneficial to the world. And in the other circle, I listed things that no one else would do but me, or fewest people. And when I found the intersection of the 3, I decided to work in that area. So there were some things that I was good at that were not really that needed. They were not that beneficial. Do you get what I'm saying? So, and there's a lot of things that are beneficial, but they weren't like the most needed. There are other things that were most needed, but I wasn't good at it. There were other things that were very needed and I was good at, like when I was in Jordan studying Islam, and I was like, I'm going to become, everyone wanted to be the next Hamza Yusuf or whatever. And I realized that that was not going to be where my impact was, because scholars without context are just giving lectures. Nomali Khan, these guys are great, but there's a difference between giving, and they're great, they help a lot of people, but there's a difference between teaching theory and helping people practice it. Malcolm would give a speech and then would lead people in a rally. It wasn't theoretical only, right? So there were a lot of things I found that maybe I was decent at and were needed, but other people were doing it. And then when it came to this realm I work in now, in building cultural, social businesses and entrepreneurship, and what I realized was I can build 10 projects in my life, or I can encourage 1,000 people to create 10 projects in their life and create 10,000. So that's where I found the middle. The most good I could do was not creating stuff myself, was multiplying by waking other people to find their dreams. And if in this room 5 people change their course a little bit and start doing what they're passionate about, I could not have created those 5 projects. So that's like my whole life justified, just in this room. So that's how I found the intersection of where I was going to work. And when you do something you're passionate about, money follows. Right? I'm not making 20,000. Like with my music tour, we were making 90,000 a year. I decided not to do that because it wasn't most necessary right now. Money follows when you're passionate.
But you're doing it for the passion anyways, you're not doing it
I would do it
money.
for free. And so if
that's-
money
that's
follows,
where,
and
that's where
yeah,
you're at complete peace.
Exactly.
With no matter what happens.
exactly,
And that was-
exactly.
That's one of the, I can't speak like you do.
No.
You're an excellent speaker. But, you know, I'm sitting here listening to him, and then we can listen all day to you talk, but when we leave here, we all have to have at least one idea of what we're gonna do to take away from here. And I've been taught altruistic volunteerism is one way to completely give yourself to somebody else and expect nothing in return. No money, no gratitude. The beauty of it is you give onefold, you get it back tenfold. And I'm in my career, my life, where I just turned 50 this year, and you start to realize your mortality. You know, it takes you longer to get up off the floor. You know, you're a little bit more tired earlier. So you start to say, I've been blessed my whole life. You know, I've had a lot of opportunities. I've been able to do a lot of things, and I have a lot of things. But what's important to me? What do I want to be left with when I leave this body and earth? I want somebody to say, well, he had, you know, a big boat and a big car and a fast, you know, whatever. Or do I want him to say, he was there for that group when they needed him. He was there to help them put that house up for the family that was less fortunate. I'll give you an example of what my family has done recently, and we do it more and more. Thanksgiving holiday is a big family holiday, right? So for the last couple of years, instead of having a dinner together where it's loaded with all this food and we waste all this food that nobody gets to eat that really needs it more than we do, we go down to a men's shelter in downtown Cleveland, and we carve turkeys to get for the next day. And we actually went 2 years ago, and this is where the altruism comes in. They had somebody say that there was going to be a radio and news broadcast for the people doing the carving. And I told my family, I said, no, we're not staying. We did what we wanted to do. We gave our you know, our love, and I don't want to be on the news for it, because that's not what I'm looking for. So I challenge everybody to think of a way that you can do something like that comes from your heart, and not expect anything in return.
Similarly, I met a lady. My sister just got married last week, and you know, when they have those weddings, you have all this food left over. And this is one of the things I think maybe some of my ideas right now are coming from just seeing a Pakistani wedding for the 10th time in my life. And they cost like $50,000 to $100,000, and you know, in the Prophet's time, they used to just slaughter an animal and just announce it. And I think there's somewhere the truth is maybe we have to do a little bit more in modern times, but not what we do. But anyways, with that said, we had like 6 trays of food afterwards, and this wasn't my idea, so I'm not gonna take credit for it. But someone looked up a homeless shelter. The wedding was on Thanksgiving, and someone looked it up and said, "Can you just drop this off?" So I just put it in the car and we went to drop it off. It was like 10 minutes away, and this old lady was there, and she was working there. And I said to her, "Oh, that's really great. You're working here on Thanksgiving." And she said, I actually volunteer here every Thanksgiving because I know this is the hardest time for them to get volunteers. And this is when the most people come. And so we spent about an hour together, and she was like opening all this food, and I was afraid, like spicy food, she's like, what the heck is it? And she's like, I'm gonna make a lentil dish out of this, I'm gonna make this, I'm gonna make this. And we spoke for an hour, and when I left, my cousin was with me from Toronto, and I told him this. This cousin, he's changed a lot, but he grew up in Saudi Arabia, and he had a very, nothing about Saudi, but he just happened to grow up in Saudi. He had a very, very Muslim versus non-Muslim outlook on the world, let's say that. And when we walked out, he surprised me. He said that, he said she's a better Muslim than we are. And that may be something that we've said in the past, but he would never say that. And I told him, I said, in the Muslim community, there's this notion of spiritual saints, and we usually attribute them to Muslim scholars. I said, she's a saint. And the way she lives is a saint. And so I think you're very right. I think the community service, social service is one. I think another thing is, I would love to see, if we're talking about making real change, I would love to see people not give, they say give the best of your wealth, not the rest, right? Give the best of our time, not the rest. That for some of us, we have to find a way of giving those 50 hours of our best hours that we usually give to some firm or something. Find a way of giving that to goodness. Not the 3 hours when we're really tired and we just want to watch a Netflix movie. Like when the core of our day, because we all have limited time. The world needs a few good people to give their good time. And God is my witness. I know I'm not better than anyone in this room, and the reason is, and that's not humility, I know I'm doing some cool stuff right now, but the reality is but because the reason is not because I deny that I'm doing some cool stuff, is that I know the opportunities I was given. And based on the opportunities I was given, I'm doing nothing. Like nobody my age was sent to as many educational programs as I was, literally. We were sent to 300 programs in a period of 8 years. We didn't have summer break, winter break. Like my parents sent us all over the world. So for what I'm doing, I should be doing 10 times more. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, this connects to your point. What's your name, sir?
Eric.
Eric, what Eric was saying. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, more or less, when it comes to faith and knowledge, surround yourself with people who have more than you and practice. And when it comes to wealth, surround yourself with people who have less than you. So you will always feel insignificant spiritually, and you always feel grateful materially. But if you do the opposite, and you surround yourself in suburbs where you have to have $400,000 to even buy a house there, and spiritually you're always the one who's doing the most in your group, then you'll have a false sense that you're doing a lot, and you won't have gratefulness. Mm-hmm. So to answer, what's your name, sister, from Wisconsin?
Neha.
Neha. So I think, one, we have to be in it together. وَتَوَاسَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. A lot of times we come to something like this, if we've been to something like this, and you go home and then you have all these ambitions, and then 2 weeks later you find yourself back where you were. That's where groups are important, communities, movements are important. We're all in this together. And Medina Project, I know it started with a very beautiful intention. And I think when things have a beautiful intention with Sister Ivana, Brother Muhammad, Amanda, Ali, and Sumaya, who are now in Allentown, who helped found this also, Khalil and others, it can turn into something much more beautiful than you first thought. And I think tonight is turning into something more. It's because Eric is here. It's not because of me. It's because you guys are all here. Like I was here last month, it didn't turn into this. So it's obviously some variable that was not me. But what I'm saying, and I mean that, so something special is happening here, but a lot of times we take something really special and then we dilute it over time because we don't realize, we're not grateful for where we're at. To realize this moment is very important. To realize that everyone here was chosen to be here is very important. To realize that angels have surrounded us, as the Prophet said, in moments like this is very important. That we are surrounded in an angelic presence. That our names have been recited. Eric's name, my name, Khalil's name, all of our names has been recited in what they call the Malakut, which is the angelic realm. To realize that great things are expected of this group is very important. To realize that a great deal of darkness can be eradicated by a small group of goodness. That you can have a dark room and you put a single bulb on, it'll light up the whole room. It doesn't take 1,000 bulbs. I think we talked about the other day that you could have a small lake and you could throw 1,000 torches of fire and it would extinguish every torch. You could have a small puddle and you could throw 1,000 matches into a little puddle and it'll extinguish every fire. It doesn't take a lot. Omar radiallahu anhu it was actually in a battle. It was a defensive battle at the time of the Prophet, and he saw an ocean of the enemy. It was a Byzantine empire that was, as the Byzantines did in their last 300 years, was just attacking everyone. And Omar stood with a very small group. And actually one of these battles was the inspiration, J.R. Tolkien took as inspiration for a battle of Helm's Deep in Lord of the Rings. But he was standing in front of this ocean. It was a 10-to-1 ratio or 20-to-1 ratio. And he said, I don't fear this ocean. And he saw the companions. And sometimes we see them as these like perfect people that didn't have real human emotions. Their hilts of their swords were hitting against their chainmail. They were so scared. And he looked at them. He says, by God, I don't fear this ocean. I fear our hearts. We will not lose this battle because of this. Because if the angels come, then what happens? We're going to lose because of this. So that's where the Reformation has to start with. And if you guys believe in what we're talking about today, then how are you going to dilute what we talk about the second you leave? Or are you going to have high ambitions? You dilute it by setting your own trajectory low. By making this was a cool social event. Making it into something you're going to send a status message about. Do me a favor. Let's do all ourselves a favor. Let's not social media this one. Let's not even share it with friends. Well, shouldn't we share the movement? Let's become the movement so we can share something substantial. For once, let not the instinct be, I have to record this for the future. Let the instinct be, let me be present in this, and let me actually not share words, because we've talked about words are empty. Let the people will see a change in me, and that's my contribution. And the metaphor I'll say is when Maryam, alayhi salam, when she was accused, right? When people saw baby Jesus, and they said that you are not married. How could you have a child? And what was she instructed to do? Huh? And do what? Point at the baby, and then Jesus spoke. Okay? Let that baby be our actions. And when people say stuff about us being terrorists, or say, oh, how was that program? Oh, how was that little talk you went to? Let's be quiet and build actions that we can point at. And then the metaphor is that Jesus will be like our actions that will speak for us. And will spread love for us. And we won't have to talk so much. We just do. We act. And that's what the prophet was. His words were between actions. Our actions are between lots of words.
Can I add
Yeah, please,
one thing to
please.
that comment about don't let them call you terrorists or call you other names? The only person that can control what they're calling you is you. You know, they can say all they want, but if you're at peace with yourself, because you're showing the love and the forgiveness and the repentance and everything that Jesus, was about, and we aspire to, nobody can hurt you. They can. It's not for us to judge that person. They will be judged someday and have to understand what consequences come from it. But you just give your love, and if the person that you're trying to give it to is not responsive, that's not your fault. And you should accept that and just move on and pray for them that they too will see what they need to see.
Right. And may I say one thing, just adding to that in a small way. We started off, people talked about Trump a lot in the first 10, 15 minutes. And I have a question that, it got me in a lot of trouble in Michigan because I said it about a dictator, and that community is very sensitive about it, but sometimes truth makes you unpopular, and that's okay. Well, I consider truth at least. Do we want Trump to go to heaven?
Of course.
Are we sure? Because there are certain dictators, when I asked this question, they said, we don't want him to repent so he can burn in hell. There's a reason I'm saying this. Mercy is actually, like you just said, mercy is actually very empowering. I just want to add to it so we don't lose that point. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was being tortured in Mecca, he was still a king. An example of that is the lady Hind, who ended up becoming a companion, so we say radiallahu anha now. She came once to attack him when they were like the early community of Jesus, when they were under strike. And he was sitting with Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, and she comes and she has a piece of an animal, like a shoulder, it's like a sharp piece of a bone, and she was going to hit him with it. And she comes and she only sees Abu Bakr, his main companion. And she says, "Where's Muhammad?" And he kind of like looks like this, and he's sitting right next to her. And when she leaves angry, he looks at him and says, "What was that?" And he says, "By God, Jibril, had put his wing over me. And had she taken another step, he was going to strike her down." Even in his most vulnerable time, God had his back. It was a mirage that he was vulnerable. The angels were like, Like in Surah Doha, when Angel Jibril came after the long pause in Revelation, and the Prophet ﷺ actually told him, he said, you stayed away from me for so long. He said it was only by the will of Allah, meaning I didn't want to stay away from you. I was ordered not to come back to you for a while. They had his back. So it was a perception of weakness. Truth is in a perception of weakness. There is no golden age of Islam. That's actually a falsity. Like there's no golden age of Christianity. Islam and Christianity are in a perpetual golden age. The only thing that there's a dark age and golden age of is Muslims. This whole idea, the golden age of Islam was 764 to 1264 before the Mongol invasion. So we are materialistic people. What Islam is a golden age based on political strength. Islam is a transcendent verbal path to God that's not even encompassed in the world. So how can it have a golden age? Age implies time. How can you apply time to a verb that transcends time? So this is a paradigm that gives us confidence. So when the woman would put thorns in front of the Prophet's house, and this happened in many different prophetic stories, and one day she didn't do that, what does he do? He goes and visits, says, are you okay? That's not someone that's empowered? How are you going to try to pull a power move on someone that does that? He knocks on your door, he's like, oh, there's no thorns from my house, so I want to make sure you're okay. Yeah, I'm feeling better. There's no victimization there. What kind of victim would go out to the oppressor and make sure they're okay? So if you're checking on someone, you have refused to play into the paradigm of victimization. So mercy and love are not fluffy hipster terms. When I say that I love those who hate me, as Jesus taught, as Muhammad ﷺ taught, and this idea that Christianity is a religion of love and Islam is a religion of law, it's just all this simplistic stuff of the last 100 years of Muslims. They just don't get it. This is like, and it's somewhat understandable. If you systematically kill all the scholars of countries over 200 years of colonization, and then you get these post-colonial people who don't know their faith leading the movements, then it makes sense. But the reality is, when someone attacks you, and I say right now, I want good for Bill O'Reilly. I want him to be happy. I want him to find peace. He's obviously upset about something. No one is that angry and doesn't have high cholesterol. No, I worry about his cholesterol. I do. I don't. But I don't mean that as a joke. But I know it sounds funny, but I don't mean that as a joke. I actually care about him. And I think that it has to be very lonely being on the wrong side of truth for that long. And I worry about Trump. I do. It's not, he can't sleep well at night, no matter how much money he has. So I actually have genuine concern for the man. And if he said that I take back what I did, I'll feel happiness for him. Because the Prophet ﷺ made dua for Abu Jahl and Umar ibn al-Khattab before they became Muslim. Strengthened the faith with one of them. How are you going to make prayer for Abu Jahl and we don't have, who in the world is worse than him? And we don't want good for them? That's empowerment. So it actually, like you said, it happens in the heart when you can love the person who hates you. You don't love their action.
That's the hardest part.
And that's why it's prophetic.
I pray daily to be more like Jesus, to make me just like Jesus was, without sin. And it's easy to forgive somebody that, to trip you over books or push you, but when people are killing people in the name of religion, and to look at them and want to offer forgiveness, that's a very difficult thing to do. But as a Christian, that's what I'm told to do.
Did you hear about the
And
Amish
I
women?
do.
Did you hear about the Amish community in Pennsylvania?
Today,
I know a few years ago when a shooter came in and killed all the girls. Do you remember that?
I didn't hear about it.
You remember that, right? There's a documentary. They not only forgave, but do you know when they forgave him? The shooter?
Right there.
They were at his funeral.
Yeah.
They showed up at his funeral. The parents of the daughters that were killed in their Amish community showed up at the funeral and made a prayer for him.
Yep.
And the family was so distressed that their son had done that. When they showed up and said, we forgive him, the family said that took them out of depression.
Yeah.
That's Christianity. That's faith. That's Islam. And it's not popular. So if someone were to say that the dictators in Syria and Egypt, and we don't like them, don't get me wrong. We're not pacifist spiritual, or like, oh, no, God will. No, like we hate those dudes. We hate their actions. But we want them to repent and to be better people. That takes a level of prophetic strength, and maybe I'm saying it and I can't do it. But if we can do that, we actually, in that moment, like Frederick Douglass, he said in his autobiography, you guys know Frederick Douglass? If you don't, just read his autobiography. I mean, you may have heard of him, but if you haven't read his autobiography, read his autobiography. that he said that there was a moment where the slave master came to the barn, and he tried to hit him, and he became this incredible abolitionist later. And he said that this is really beautiful, and this has to do with Bob Marley, what he said in the Redemption song about mental, free yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds, right? That whole thing. He said that at that moment when the slave master tried to strike me, I blocked his punch for the first time, and I actually pulled my hand back to hit him, and I saw in that moment fear in his eyes. And he says, in that moment, and he didn't hit him, by the way. He says, in that moment, I stopped being a slave. He says, it was years later that I received my physical freedom. But I was no longer a slave that day. He was empowered at the moment that he actually, because to forgive someone puts you in a position of strength. To have mercy on someone, right? You can't have, so even if you seem like you're the victim, if you have mercy on someone, who's actually in strength? It's a power move. He's like, hey man, you see Bill O'Reilly? If I went on a show, all the Muslims, like the care guys, and I love them. But they'll be like, you are wrong, Bill. They'll be like, Bill, how are you doing? Are you okay? No, I'm serious, and genuinely, not to be like sarcastic. I actually care about you. Even if you hate me, it's okay. It's okay. I actually care about you. I think you really believe in what you're saying, and I respect your sincerity. I just disagree. What would if somebody actually did that on Fox News, people are watching would be like, that's Jesus.
The soft, still voice.
Why is Jesus coming to Makkah? Right? I mean, it would, and the more he got angry, you would respond, I understand, but I'm going to turn the other cheek right now. What he's quoting the Bible.
Absolutely.
Oh, how come the Muslims, there's a time for death and a time for life. Ecclesiastes, he's quoting our stuff. He's speaking like why is Bill O'Reilly not acting like Jesus and he is? That's an assertion of our will. The softer you make your voice, like Malcolm didn't yell. He would say, in the words of Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he was so calm. He was like, the guy, there's power there. He didn't have to raise his voice. Bob Dylan, when he would perform and the crowd would be yelling, like before, because he went electric, right? In '64 in Newport. Yeah. And the crowd is like, sell out, right? Normally, he would just start his guitar and start screaming, I can hear you. So he started doing that in the beginning. He would like yell back at the crowd. And then when they started saying, sell out, he did this thing. It was really, and this is like a metaphor. He would go on the mic and go, they loved him. They wanted to hear, they paid to hear him perform. He would whisper on the mic. He would pretend to play the guitar. And people were like, shh, we can't hear his song. And then he would say, I don't believe you. And he would start his song, right? So as they went louder, he went softer. So they became softer to hear what he said. Then he went loud. So it's just, you don't pander to people. Should I play a song?
Please.
Does anyone here not believe in guitar? Would somebody be uncomfortable if I played a song? I just want to make sure. No, if someone is. There's a difference of opinion in Islamic law about it. There's a lot of people who say it's not okay, but there are people. So if it's okay, I'll play a song.
It depends on how good you are.
Hope he's
Then I
better
might
than
be
me.
getting uncomfortable.
Did you play? I'm not a singer, I'm a songwriter. I'm just going to play one song that kind of connects to what I'm saying.
After work, I want to play guitar.
So I'm a songwriter. That's actually kind of somewhat my main profession. And I have other people sing my songs. So today I will sing it. This one is called the Swan Song. I was, remember that country singer I told you that was on Fox? Kareem Salama. So we were, this most cliche thing to do with the country singer, but we were in a pickup truck in Houston. It sounds like a fake story, but it's real. And he was like, he has a really slow way of talking. So like, I talk so fast. So like, in a 1 hour conversation, like you have possession time in football?
Yeah.
His possession time, the conversation is like 10%. He's like, while I was in Oklahoma, and I'm like talking. So we were driving by a fire station, and he was talking about something about Michael Jackson or something, I remember. And then I saw the fire station, and this line just came to my head, the idea of being a firefighter in hell. The metaphor of being a firefighter, or literally being a firefighter in hell. And then I built a song around it. The cemeteries are empty, the movement's underground. There's no one left for me down in Johnsontown. I've learned the art of being lonely, just a painting on the wall. There's nothing you can do for me, Leave your flowers and be gone. Raise me with the lost souls, the wayward bound, the outlaws that never found a home. Didn't belong here, won't belong up there, will be the last firefighters in hell. Will be the last firefighters in hell. So before I go to the next verse, I want you guys to think about what it means to be a firefighter in hell. Like, what's that metaphor? Like, every time you put out one fire, two fires pop up. Is it an inner city teacher? Is it literal that this guy cared so much about his people, he made a request to God to let him go down to hell and fight fires instead of going to paradise? I'm not looking for salvation on a cross or in a crowd. You can lead your emancipation. Just leave me in the south. And in the burgundy evening, when the station master calls, the heavens will be weeping when they see the angels fall. Raise me with the lost souls, the wayward bound, the outlaws that never found a home. Didn't belong here, won't belong up there, will be the last firefighters in hell. Will be the last firefighters in hell. And we're gone. Don't despair, we'll be the last firefighters in hell.
All right.
The line is just a clarification. That was not a theological comment. The cross around the crowd. I don't want to offend anyone. The idea of that was symbology. I don't want to be like Benjamin Franklin said when he was asked which church he's part of. He says, "Sir, if I'm part of a church, I'm the only member in my church." Right? And that was the idea of that second. So the beginning is talking about loneliness, but it's kind of important, that one line, because we're talking about starting a movement. I wrote this a few years ago, and it was that line starts off with, "The cemeteries are empty." So it could either mean there's no one inside the graves or there's no one visiting the graves, right? The movement's underground, so then you understand which one it meant. The cemeteries are empty, there's no one above ground, the movement's underground. So it could have double meaning. Either the only people doing anything are the people who are already dead, or the movement, our movement is underground. People haven't seen it yet. So the cemeteries are empty, the movement's underground, there's no one left for me down in Johnstown. I'm not going to explain that because that's personal. I've learned the art of being lonely, just a painting on the wall, and there's nothing you can do for me, leave a flower and be gone. That goes back to the grave metaphor. And I had written a song a few years earlier that you say love will have to, I was talking to a girl, it was the girl who left because of money. You say love will have to wait, I say your love is dead, but lying in your grave won't stop the spring from coming. So just because you're dead in your grave with love, your love has died, you're still going to see the flowers around you in spring. Like T.S. Eliot said, April is the cruelest month. The flowers are going to come around you. So leave your flower and be gone. And then it goes, the second verse after the chorus. So the chorus is, raise me with the lost souls, the wayward bound, the outlaws that never found a home. Didn't belong here. So if I didn't belong here, this is actually a little bit of, it's not literal maybe, or it could be literal. But he's saying that, like, if this is the group of people who's going to heaven, you guys are the saved. Like, you made heaven to like limited real estate. So our group gets in, everyone goes to hell. It's like a gated community that you want to stay out of, the pearly gates. But it's a gated community. If this is a group going to heaven, I'm not going to belong with you guys. So I might as well get ready for hell. Because this is not my people. You know, Biggie Smalls, the rapper, he said it a different way. He says, when I die, I want to go to hell. I can't say that's a bunch of cuss words. I don't want to go to heaven with the goody-goodies dressed in white. I like black Tims and black hoodies, right? But anyways, so then he says, I'm not looking for salvation on a cross or in a crowd. Not in your public symbols, not in groupthink. Even if all of you hate me after today, I'm okay with that. As long as I'm being true in this moment. I'm not looking for salvation on a cross or in a crowd. So I'm not going to, like, this movement is not going to be based on getting Facebook likes. And like, so I have friends that are speakers that literally buy their own Facebook views and likes. Like, it's ridiculous. I'm not looking for salvation on a cross or in a crowd. You can lead your emancipation, leave me in the South. So that's, if this is freedom, then leave me a slave in the South. But there's also a metaphor of the South being hell and North being freedom. So if that's the freedom of the North, the paradise, then I'm okay with hell. And that's a metaphor. Like Iqbal and Sayyid Nursi said, we would rather be in hell and in truth than in heaven and in falsehood. And they didn't mean literally that good people will be in hell, but it was a metaphor. And then in the burgundy evening, when the station master calls, of course the station master is the station master, the heavens will be weeping when they see the angels fall. So if the good people end up in hell, then it's going to be a strange sight. It's like Paradise Lost with Milton, where they're going to see the angels falling and the people in heaven are going to be like, and the real metaphor is what I did with the guitar. Can I show you real quick? It's kind of a very subtle thing. In the last part of the song, I actually go the other way, and what happens is heaven and hell flip. And you realize that the people who thought they were in heaven, it's like the hereafter flips, and they realize the people in hell were in heaven, the people in heaven were in hell. That's why I changed the direction of the last lyrics, and it goes, don't despair will be the last firefighters in hell, but while I'm saying that, I'm actually flipping the chords. So it shows the world turning upside down, and the people in hell and heaven switch over. So that's it. Awesome.
Can I make a comment? I totally agree with you though, thinking about the whole, like we write a lot, but we don't do a lot. But like the way I was raised, like and that's kind of like why I'm the way I am. Like my dad never told me like, Fatima, do this. Like
Right.
he never once in his life told me to say thank you. He never once told me, don't do. He always did it through action. Like that's just who my dad is. He
Exactly.
would always say thank you. And it's funny, like when you say 40 neighbors, my dad, he doesn't have 40, but he's the closest person I think to that, because my neighbor on the right, her husband died when I was really young, and my dad every winter, when he does our driveway, he does hers. Mows her lawn, our lawn,
amazing,
and
yeah.
it's like he doesn't tell her, he
Yeah.
doesn't do it, he just does it. And
That's
I
beautiful.
think when he thinks of neighbors, he also does like he goes to the gym, he knows those are his neighbors.
Right,
He goes
right.
to work.
That's concentric
And
circles.
My dad's best friend is like Mexican Israeli. He's
Yeah.
like they're both so completely
Yeah.
different. But they've been best friends for about like 25 years.
That's
And
amazing.
my dad would take him from Cleveland to Solon because of like carpooling. And my dad, I was one day in the car with him because I went to work, and his friend was sleeping in the passenger seat, and my dad was driving him home. And my dad like took a long route, and then he kept driving and driving. Like, where are you going? He goes, he's tired. Like, I want him to sleep.
No.
And like he did that, and I was just like, it would like really warm my heart. And
Yeah.
like on Saturdays, I always I volunteer like an African food bank, and he knows I'm always gone, and then I work at night, and he's like, can I come with you? I'm like, sure, you can come with me. And when we went, there's like high schoolers doing volunteer hours. There's children with mental disabilities who really like focus on like their developmental skills, and they love what they do. And my dad's like, wow, like the power of action. Like he literally,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
the first thing he said when he walked in, because you have like high schoolers, you have children with mental disabilities who are so excited to like weigh 5 pounds of apples, tie them, and clicker, and we do it for like 3 hours, and they love it. It is like the best thing. And my dad's like, the girls, like, little girl came up to him, her name was Caitlin, she has Down syndrome, and my dad's like, he's like, I've been so selfish my whole life. And I like look at him and I'm like, if you're selfish, why not?
Yeah.
But it's beautiful because it really is true. It's I've never been taught like do it. Because
Yeah.
I feel like that touches surface. The surface doesn't make you do anything.
Exactly, and I think just one caveat to that is that when I say that we have to stop talking and writing, so when you have a movement and you have like I study the 60s counterculture a lot, and you had the anti-Vietnam protests, and you also had the civil rights, you have to have diversification. So some people's roles will be to be the novelist, like the Baldwin, and he's going to write 8 novels. And someone else's role is going to be a teacher and speaker. But the subculture cannot be defined by one of those. And what's happening right now in the Muslim community is lecturing has become the primary method of pedagogy. And we know the Prophet ﷺ didn't do that. That's why it's such a strange thing. Like when there was conflict between the Ansar and the Muhajir, and Dr. Jackson says the Ansar are the inner city people and the Muhajir are the immigrants. So we have that again today. He didn't give a speech on brotherhood. Jesus also didn't do that. He didn't give a speech on brotherhood. He took each of them and made them brothers. That's a social cultural institution. That's not a lecture on religion. So there's just about balance. And the other thing about the thing you said about your father and the way he lived his life, I mentioned this downstairs, and I think I mentioned this family before. My only connection to Accra until I came a few years ago for a show was the Khimji family. Anyone know them? Anyone actually know? They're part of the Shia community here. So yeah. So I went to school at Fatima Khimji, and we spent 3-4 years together. And our MSA was very close. I mean, and there was of course boundaries and stuff, but there was actually a family, brother-sister family relationship. A lot of times MSAs become very cold because of certain applications of theology, but we were very, very close. And what happened was, a month after she graduated, she died in a car accident. Allah yarhamuha. And they're from Akron. And I'd never been to Akron or anything, and we had always talked about coming to visit her family because that's how close we all were. And her dad was a dentist, and he had actually gone to pick her up from the airport, and she said it was raining a lot that day. So she had just texted her friend, it's raining just like Florida, because she was in Florida before that. And she had just gotten to like Harvard Law, and she was doing all this awesome stuff. She was going to do Peace Corps, and we had all these dreams. And we actually, anyone seen the TV show Office? You seen Office? So we used to all watch Office, and I remember right before we graduated, it was an episode where Jim and Pam. This is very silly, but this is what happened. Jim and Pam had just they were about to get married, right? They were just gotten. It was like the episode where they finally, And so she had said it's gonna be so weird seeing them married, and by the time the next Office episode came, the next season, she was gone. And I remember I didn't watch it for a long time, and when I watched it, I was just like, oh my god, she was like talking about that, right? It was just this weird, surreal moment. So when I came to her funeral. All my friends from DC, actually the vice president of Georgetown, who is like the top professor there, he's now the president of Franklin Marshall College, he drove a bus of 15 Muslims and some other people of other faiths from DC to come to her funeral in Akron. And I met them from Indiana. And so I had to say a few words there, and I was saying a few words, and what the crazy thing was, one, the funeral was completely diverse, which if I died, it wouldn't be. The reality is. The second thing that was crazy though was, and I mentioned this to the kids downstairs, is this guy who was an undertaker. He actually worked at the funeral home. He came. He used to dig the graves. He had a crane. He came, and he had this American flag bandana. Like the image is so stark, like it's clear. It's been 8 years now, and he came with a huge American flag, and he put it on his grave. So I thought that was a custom of the. And I looked around. There's no flags, big American flag. He brought it himself, and so I'm like. And so after the funeral, I went up to him and said, like, why did you believe that flag? He's like, he got really emotional. He says he was a true American. And this is an undertaker at the cemetery. And I was like, you don't know who people are until after they die, right? Jadena has that. You know Jadena, the guy who wrote the song Classic Man? Check out his song, All Hail the Chief. He has that line where he says, I don't want my best, he says, they say, Jadena, why do you dress so classic? I don't want my best dressed day to be in my casket. Just a random line that came to mind. But so he put the flag in. I went to him after. We have one Jadena fan. Okay. So I went to him after, and I said, like, why did you do that? And he said he was a real American. I said, why? And this like really touching moment. He opens his mouth, and he has all this like dental work done. And this is a true story. He said that he's been giving me free dental care for 3 years. Like, that's faith. Not attending 4 isnas, 3 zaytunas, 1 al-maghrib, 2 bayinas, and watching YouTube videos. That's the recipe that has to be cooked and then eaten. But don't confuse the recipe with the actual pie. Like you can't. The theory doesn't mean anything if it stays a recipe. And so I think if we just get going, and I think a Medina project can help with this, that we start doing those things together, and we don't see it as, oh, this is like social activism, and then this is my spirituality. You find God in there. Like in the hadith where we're told that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say on the Day of Judgment that I was hungry, why didn't you feed me? I was thirsty. And then they said, how could you be hungry, God? He says, when my servant, my creation was hungry, if you had fed them, you would have found me there. That's incredible. So you can find God in that. So it's not like this is my activism and this is my spirit, my religious life. That becomes your religious life. That's what people don't get. And one last story, if you don't mind. Some people may have to go. I'll end with this. Abu Bakr, so he was one of the closest, that's actually so many stories we could do, but he was the closest companion of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It was like time for the second prayer in the day, Dhuhr, and the Prophet stood up in the mosque and he says, how many of you today have fed a poor person? He raised his hand. This was only Dhuhr, it wasn't like Isha time. He says, it was like midday. He says, how many people today have visited the sick? How many people? He went through a list of deeds and he had already done them. And when he became the caliph, when he became the head of the Muslim community, and by the way, the word ummah, I don't know if you know this, technically the word ummah doesn't refer to Muslims. The ummah of the Prophet is every human being, whether they have consciously accepted it or not. So when the Prophet makes dua for his ummah, it's for every human being. Some people have not recognized that they're part of the ummah, but they're default. Anyways, so he goes, when he was a caliph, he had a habit of going to, and some of you know the story, but listen to the detail of the story. And this will give us direction on what we should be doing. And like I said, it doesn't only have to be social activism. It has to be what's the worship, because all good actions are worship with the right intention. With the worship that is closest to our heart, we do that, and then we encourage everyone else in whatever they're doing, as long as it's good work, right? Even, like I said, even if it's writing a script for a movie, if it's good work, it's all part of the movement that we have to start. He goes, as he's caliph, he has the responsibility of the world on him. He would go every day to a blind woman's house and clean her house. It's a true story. And nowadays there's like this false machismo culture amongst Muslim men where they think that that's not their role to clean. One, the Prophet would clean and mend his own clothes, but he was the caliph of the Muslim ummah. If anyone said, I can take a break from this, he could have taken someone, one of his thousands of followers, and sent him to do it. What was he? And he didn't, just like you didn't. He didn't publicize it. No one knew he used to do this. Omar was stalking him because he always wanted to be better than him because he was like the second best companion. Okay, so he was following him and he didn't think he was the second best. Omar actually said, if I have one foot in heaven, I don't feel comfortable going to heaven unless the second foot is in there. And he said that when the list of hypocrites came out, he went to Hudayfa and said, I want to know if I'm on that list, even though he was already promised paradise. So like when we make shirts to say MSA, we're implying that we're Muslim. Omar didn't actually think he was Muslim, so he wouldn't wear an MSA shirt. Not that MSA is cool and all. I'm saying to assume you're part of the Muslim Student Association is to assume you're a Muslim. Being a Muslim means that you're in spiritual submission to God. Omar wasn't as confident as we were. But student organizations are cool. But the point is, it's not an identity though. So Abu Bakr goes in and Omar's like peeking and seeing what he's doing. He goes in and he does certain things and Omar watches him. He cleans, and their bathrooms back there were like literally holes in the ground. And he's actually cleaning. I mean, it's actually, I lived in Turkey for a while, and I lived in a place that had a traditional bathroom. It's not glamorous. Like we think of it as like, oh, it's like rustic. It's not. It's like horrible. So he's like cleaning it and everything. And then he sweeps her house, and she has no idea who he is, by the way. Okay? And then he cooks for her, and then he feeds her. And this is what read the story. It didn't say he gave her food. He fed her. Now, in our simplistic, legalistic mindset, and Islamic law, Sharia, I'm not scared of any of that. There is Sharia in our deen. There are laws. There's rules. Okay? There are rules. But we don't understand the spirit of the law. Somebody will say, wait, when he fed her, did his hand? No, I'm not kidding. No, look. And to be fair, I'm not like some progressive, new age, like I study theology and all of that, and someone would say, wait, but there was no one else in the house. Isn't that khalwa? A man and a woman alone, and there's no one else present? A man and a woman can't be, like they understood the spirit of the law. An elderly, blind woman, that wouldn't have crossed his mind. That what if I am seduced by her? Because I'm alone. Like legal theory is contextualized.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you have text without context, right? It's pretext, as T.J. Winter says. So he cooks for her and then he feeds her, and Omar's like, So next day he beats him to it, and he goes, he cleans the bathroom, he sweeps up, and he feeds her. And as soon as he cooks for her, and Omar could never beat Abu Bakr in any level, even though he always tried, which was admirable. And he feeds her, and he would say this himself, so I'm not like jacking him. So he feeds her, and as soon as he feeds her, she starts to cry. And he's like, man, I messed up. I'm not trying to do something good. I'm making an old woman cry, and she's blind. And she starts weeping, and he says, what did I do? What? And by the way, he knew how to cook, by the way. You can't cook for someone if you don't know how to cook. It wasn't like making a sandwich. You had to cook it like that. There was no refined bread, as we said. Right. So she starts to cry, and he says, why are you crying? Listen to this. She says that other man, the young man who used to come, she didn't know was the caliph, he must have died. He died, didn't he? And Omar's like, how do you know it's not me? And he hadn't spoken until that moment. And she says, he must have died. He's like, he didn't die, first of all, right? He didn't say, oh, by the way, he's a caliph and I'm going to be the next one. He didn't know that at the time. But the point is, he says, no, he hasn't died. He says, but how did you know it was? Because I did everything he did. He says, you didn't do everything. And this is the spirit of our care for people. She said that he knew that I had pain in my jaw. Now, how are you so sensitized to people that you know that? Nowadays, religious leaders don't even know the people they speak to. They get emails from faceless crowds. They respond generic halal, haram answers. Right? And I'm not blaming them, and there's 10 of them for 10 million people, but there's no connection like that. He was so sensitive. It's like the Prophet, when he spoke to that, sorry, really quick, he was speaking to that lady who had somewhat of a mental condition, and she would talk too much, right? That whole story. and he would sit down with her, and everyone else would get annoyed because she would keep asking the same questions and talking about random stuff, and she would ramble, and then he would listen to her for, like, they said Saad, which is like an hour, like time had passed, and then when she was finally done, all the companions were like, okay, let's get him out of here. You know how like important people have entourages, they're always like, 5 minutes with Hamza Yusuf, no, you're taking too much of his time, like those like they're my friends, but they're nuts. So like he would actually ask her another question when she was done, because he knew she needed someone to talk to. And they said in the story, they said he asked her the term they use is a non yes and no question, an open-ended question, so she would be able to talk more. It wasn't like, how are you? And she could say good. He was like, tell me more about this. And then all the companions were like, what? So just like that, Abu Bakr was so sensitive to this woman, and Umar learned something that day. It's not just about serving. You have to be connected to that person. That he had noticed in her jaw there was something that would have caused pain. He must have asked her about that. And she said that because he knew that there was a pain in my jaw, when he would feed me with his own hand, he would first put the food in his own mouth and soften it before feeding me. Once again, if we're prisoners of theology, theology enhances us, not prisoners. You'll say, no, actually, brother, the story couldn't have happened. The saliva of a non-mahram is actually not permissible for a woman to touch a man's saliva. That's legally you are right. And that's what happens when law is not in context of spirit. Like just like the gun with the AK-47.
Right.
Like you have a problem with the guy with the gun. We're doing the same thing with Muslim law. So that's the sensitivity that will lead to a movement of real, authentic care and love.
Yeah. The Catholic Church does similar things. I think all the churches, that are spelled out do the same.
And I think that's why the
It all
Protestant
rolls-
Reformation
It all
happened.
rolls to God in the end,
Right.
ultimately.
If you get a chance, there's a book, Churching of America, by Finke Stark. They studied the rise of Christianity in America, and when the Catholic Church became stagnant, how the Methodists and the Baptists, they actually took faith to the people, and they used to call them the Methodist riders. They used to go on horses.
Yeah.
And while the church became mainline, they used to have like seminary 6-year programs. They actually got to the people. So in college, I wrote an article about how that applies to the Muslim community. When we became formalized, we lost our flavor. But it's a really great book. It's called Churching of America.
Churching of America.